بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Last week we spoke about the Israeli bombardment of Beirut, Lebanon in 1982 to expel the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, from Lebanon. So Israel, they started bombarding Beirut in order to expel the PLO. And this bombardment, it continued for a period of about 2 months, and it was very intense bombardment, extreme shelling that the Arab world had never experienced anything like this, with this intensity. Beirut was practically destroyed under this bombardment. The city was destroyed. So finally, on August 21st of 1982, the PLO agreed to leave Lebanon. They agreed to withdraw all of their forces from Lebanon, but they made a condition that the United States should guarantee their safety during their exit. That the US should make sure that their exit is safe and secure. And this exit of the PLO from Lebanon should be under the supervision of international forces. So Israel agreed to this, and America, and at that time America was under the leadership of President Ronald Reagan. America also agreed to this, and the PLO started to leave Lebanon. And they left in waves, they left in groups. So the first group that left Lebanon, they were taken to Cyprus. And then other groups were taken, and they were taken to different locations, to different areas. And finally, on August 30th of 1982, the head of the PLO, Yasser Arafat, he finally left Beirut. And he went to Tunisia. And the PLO, all of their forces, eventually they exited Lebanon. And this basically ended the Palestinian presence in Lebanon. When the PLO left Lebanon, that's it for the Palestinian presence in Lebanon, except for the Palestinians who were in Lebanon in the refugee camps in Lebanon. There were Palestinian civilians that remained in refugee camps in Lebanon. And the PLO, because PLO is an armed organization, so they were providing protection for those refugee camps. But now that the PLO, basically the Palestinian military that was providing protection for those Palestinian refugee camps, now that support is gone because the PLO has exited Lebanon. So the refugees and their camps and their tents remained, but now they are completely exposed. So the refugee camps were exposed completely when the PLO left. And these refugee camps, they were really in a very terrible, miserable condition. They were not camps in the sense of tents or houses. When you think of refugee camp, maybe you think of organized tents and you think of like a tent city and the refugees are staying in those tents. It was really not like this at all. The Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon were not like this at all. Rather, they were just wooden or metal shacks, small shacks, where 30 or 40 people could be living in one room. Can you imagine that? One room, a regular sized room, and 30 or 40 people crammed inside that room. And the streets where those camps were located, they were not even paved. And there was no drainage system. So the streets were completely filthy, like a swamp of sewage on those streets. And there was only one street leading in and out of those camps. Right? So the situation was really, really terrible, right? And they were living in very, very bad conditions, and now they do not have the PLO military protection anymore either. So this was the situation of the Palestinian civilian refugees in those camps in Lebanon. So as we mentioned, Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO, he left Beirut on August 30th, 1982. So the PLO, it's all gone. Just 2 weeks later, after Yasser Arafat left, on September 15th of 1982, Israeli forces led by Ariel Sharon, who later on became the Prime Minister of Israel, right? But in 1982, he was a military commander. So on September 15th, 1982, these Israeli forces led by Ariel Sharon, they moved to make a siege on the Sabra and Shatila camps in Lebanon. These are two of the refugee camps that were in Lebanon, Palestinian refugee camps that were within Lebanon. So Ariel Sharon and the Israeli forces, they surrounded these two camps. And Sharon, he made an agreement with the leader of the Christian Maronites, right? This was a Christian extremist group in Lebanon who hated the Muslims and hated the Palestinians. And one of their goals was to expel the Palestinian presence in Lebanon. And they had been trying to do this already for years, get rid of the Palestinians from Lebanon. So now that the PLO was gone, the Israelis and these Christian Maronites, they all thought that this is our chance now to get rid of the Palestinians, right? So they worked together. So Ariel Sharon, the military commander of these Israeli forces, he made an agreement with the leader of these Christian Lebanese Maronites, and they agreed to work together to invade and massacre the refugees who were within those two camps, the Sabra and Shatila camps in Lebanon. So Sharon agreed that the Israeli forces under his command would besiege the camps, meaning they would surround these camps, but they would not enter because they feared that if they actually enter the camps, this might expose them to some type of danger. Look at the cowardly nature of these people. They said, like, we'll surround it, but we're not going to actually go inside. They're afraid. These armed, military officers are afraid of civilian refugees that are living in these camps. They don't want to enter. So Sharon said, okay, our people, we will surround the camps to make sure that no one can come in and no one can go out. And the job of you, Christian Maronites, you are going to go in and you're actually going to do the invasion. And you're going to go in and massacre the people inside those camps. So see how they work together? The Israelis, they surround, preventing anyone from coming in and out. And the Maronites, they go in order to actually carry out the massacre. So this was the agreement that they made with each other. And the Maronites, these Christians, they agreed. They were very happy to do this. And they said that, yeah, we have a good experience in doing this type of thing, going from shack to shack and massacring everyone that we encounter. They were ready to do this. So then, on the next day, September 16th, 1982, the great massacre of Sabra and Shatila, these two refugee camps, occurred. And it is said that up to 3,500 men, women, and children were slaughtered. They were massacred on that day, slaughtered like sheep. Women and young girls were assaulted by these forces that came in. Some of the people who were slaughtered, they were slaughtered with axes. Can you imagine these barbaric people coming in with axes and like killing the people with axes? Children's heads, young children, their heads were smashed against walls, and they slaughtered everyone in their sight. Anyone present in the camp was slaughtered. by these Christian Maronites, while the Israeli forces, they surrounded the camp so nobody could escape. And this was all under the command of Ariel Sharon. So this massacre, there are descriptions of this massacre. Some people who survived, they described it. And also some journalists who later came on. They came to the area and they saw the aftermath of that massacre. They gave their accounts of what they saw as well. Right? And this is something, we need to keep this in our mind. It's difficult to hear what happened, but it's important to keep it in our mind as well, to know what type of people these people are. And what they're doing today in Gaza is very similar to what they did in 1982 as well. So, as we mentioned, these Jews under Ariel Sharon, they surrounded the camps, and the Christian Maronites, they're the ones who actually went into the camps and started executing people. So before sunset on Thursday, September 16th, 1982, the operation to invade the camps began, and this massacre carried out by this Lebanese Maronite militia and these Israeli occupation soldiers surrounding, it lasted for about 36 hours. The whole operation lasted for about 36 hours. And on Friday morning, the morning of September 17th, some children and some women managed to escape to the Gaza hospital, which was in the Shatila camp. And they informed the doctors of the news of what had happened. So this massacre continued until Saturday afternoon, September 18th. And Ariel Sharon, his motto for this operation was slaughter without emotions. That was the motto. Right? Slaughter them without any emotions. Don't feel bad about what you are doing. So some of the survivors, they spoke about the experience. One of the survivors, a woman named Ghazi, she said they invaded the camp. They invaded the camp at 5:30 on September 16th. At first, we didn't hear gunfire because the killing was initially done with axes and knives. And they buried people alive with bulldozers. And she said, we ran barefoot. And she said, they slaughtered my husband and they slaughtered 3 of my sons in this massacre. They killed my husband in the bedroom. Then they slaughtered one of the boys and they burned the other one alive after cutting off his leg. And I found the 3rd boy with his belly slit open. And they did the same thing to my son-in-law as well. So can you imagine this woman seeing her husband and her sons massacred in such a way? Another survivor, a woman, she mentioned, they killed my husband and son in the massacre. And the most horrifying scene was of our neighbor, Al-Hajjah Munira, who was killed after they slaughtered her 4-month-old baby in front of her eyes. Can you imagine that? They took a 4-month-old baby from the mother and slaughtered the child in front of the eyes of the mother. And she said they lined the people up in fields and they formed execution squads. A large number of women were assaulted, and some people raised white flags. Some of these refugees, they take white flags and they're waving them up like, we surrender, especially the women and the children holding up white flags. But they were the first victims of the massacre. Those who were holding up the white flags, they were the first ones who were executed, including 50 women. They wanted to surrender, they were ready to surrender, but the gunmen killed them all. So these criminals did not stop there. They attacked the Akka hospital and Gaza hospital. Right? We're not talking about the land of Gaza, but the name of the hospital. It was the Gaza hospital. Right? So they attacked the Akka hospital and they attacked the Gaza hospital, killing doctors and patients. And then they forced 40 patients into trucks. They took 40 patients into trucks, and those patients were never seen again. Right? Probably they took them off somewhere and they massacred them. She said no trace of them was seen afterwards. Bulldozers dug mass graves south of Shatila with the participation of the Israelis. So the Christian Maronites and the Israelis, they dug these mass graves with bulldozers and they buried people into those graves. And they demolished many houses with these bulldozers as well. So this massacre, it happened to coincide with the occasion of the Jewish New Year. There was a correspondent for Time magazine, a man named Roberto Suro. He was a correspondent for Time magazine in Beirut. And he recounts what he saw after entering the camps. After the massacre, he entered the camps to see what had happened. So this is a reporter for Time magazine, right? A journalist. He said, there was nothing. When I entered the camp, there was nothing but piles of rubble and corpses, bodies stacked on top of each other. Children, women, men. Some had bullets in their heads. Some had their necks cut. Some had their hands tied behind their backs. And some had their hands tied to their feet. Some parts of heads were blown off. There was a body of a woman holding her child to her chest, and both of them, it could be seen that they were both killed by a single bullet. The bullet went through the child and then went through the mother, and she was still holding the child, and both of the bodies were dead on the ground. Then he said, I saw a woman on a torn body. He saw a survivor there, this woman. She was leaning over a dead body that was torn up, and this woman was screaming, and she was saying, oh, my husband, Ya Allah, who will help me? My husband has died. All my children have been killed. My husband has been slaughtered. What should I do, Ya Allah? Ya Allah. This woman crying over the body of her husband and her children. This reporter, he also said, we saw a girl no more than 3 years old. Imagine a 3-year-old girl lying dead on the road like a discarded doll, like a doll thrown in the middle of the road. A human being, a 3-year-old child. Her white dress stained with mud, blood, and dirt. She had been shot in the back of her head, and her brain was exposed. I saw a mother holding her child, both of whom had been shot in the head. There were naked women who had their hands and feet tied behind their back. So they assaulted these women first, and then they executed them. He said, a baby with a crushed head was floating in a pool of blood, and next to him was a milk bottle on an ironing table near one of the houses. And then he said, look at how sadistic these people are. He said there was one baby who the limbs were all cut off of that baby. They cut the arms off, they cut the legs off, and then they organized the limbs of the baby in a circle. And they placed the decapitated head of the baby in the middle of the circle. This is what they do to babies. Not only kill them, but they're so barbaric and sadistic that they enjoy mutilating the bodies as well. Wal-iyadhu billah. This is the type of people that we're talking about. Menachem Begin, right? This shaitan who was the Prime Minister of Israel, he commented on this massacre in the Knesset, which is like the Israeli Congress, right? He gave a speech. And he said, he was bragging about this massacre. He was very proud of it. And he said, these people that were massacred, these Palestinians that were massacred, they are animals walking on 2 legs. They're animals that just walk on 2 legs instead of 4. So it's no problem if you slaughter them and massacre them and do whatever you want to do with them. They're animals. This is what he said. Right? These are the type of people. This was the leader. Right? This was the Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, making this type of a statement. One of the Maronite leaders, one of these Christian Maronite leaders, these are the ones who carried out the actual executions. He told an American journalist, we waited so many years. He was very happy. He said, we waited so many years to be able to invade these camps of Western Beirut. And the Israelis chose us. The Israelis, they made the siege, But they chose us to actually carry out the operation because we are better than them at this type of operation, going from house to house and slaughtering everyone on a systematic basis. So when the journalist asked this Christian Maronite, when the journalist asked him, did you take any prisoners? Okay, you massacred all of these people. Did you take any prisoners? And he replied, these operations are not the type where you take any prisoners. What does that mean? It means that no, we don't take any prisoners. We don't take any captives in this type of operation. Our whole objective is to just slaughter everybody, men, women, and children. So they were very happy that they got this opportunity to do this. They wanted to do this for years. They had been wanting to do this for years, but they couldn't because of the PLO presence in Beirut up to that point. But once the PLO left, then they saw this as their opportunity to carry out this barbaric massacre. Wal-'iyadhu billah. So after this massacre, tensions began to rise between the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, and Syria, because Syria also did not want any Palestinian presence in Lebanon, and the PLO was agitated. They were upset because Syria did not help them in Lebanon. Syria did not support the PLO in Lebanon. So this actually led to a rupture between the relations between the PLO and between Syria after these massacres. So the presence of the PLO in Lebanon officially ended, and with these operations and these massacres that took place after that, the Palestinian presence in Lebanon, it greatly weakened. And those who remained, those few Palestinians who remained in Lebanon after these massacres, they were very scared. They were trembling with fear because they did not have the support. They did not have any military armed support anymore since the PLO had left. So here, Lebanon, on May 17th, 1983, they decided to make a peace agreement with Israel. Lebanon officially decided to make a peace agreement with Israel, that there will be no more aggression between the two countries. So on May 17th, they signed this agreement, but this treaty, it collapsed very soon afterwards. This treaty, it collapsed soon afterwards. Right? It was not able to go through. And inshallah, we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Bi-idhnillah. جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.